we're having a few issues with. I wanted to make sure we're being beamed live to our audience, which I found out that this is. So forgive me. I'm going to start again from the beginning. Let's pray once again. Yes, now we have our people on YouTube now. Hello, everyone. Initially, it wasn't connecting. I don't know what the problem was. So, yes, now people are here. I was wondering why it wasn't connecting before. All right, so let's start with a prayer. Almighty King, the Lord of Lords, the God of gods, the creator of the heavens and the earth. We thank you for your gift of wisdom upon our life, and we thank you for your knowledge and your guidance. And we beg you to continue to unleash this upon this generation so this could be the generation that walks with God. Almighty King, help us find you. We love you and we seek you. Help us find you, O Lord, in Yahushua's name. Amen. So, earlier on, I was talking about the word knowledge. This is going to be a very deep teaching, more logical than scriptural, but also quite scriptural. So I'm going to start with the definition of the word knowledge, and I have three definitions, all available for everyone on the internet. The first definition is fact, information, and skills acquired through experience or education, the theoretical or practical understanding of a subject. The second definition is awareness or familiarity gained by experience of a fact or situation. The third is knowledge is familiarity, awareness, or understanding of someone or something, such as facts or information, descriptions, or skills, which is required through experience or education by perceiving, discovering, or learning knowledge, can be referred to a theoretical or practical understanding of a subject. And that the third one is Wikipedia's definition. And I'm going to work with the three. The first one is facts, information, and skills acquired through experience or education. The theoretical or practical understanding of a subject. I want to twist each and every word there. Unverifiable facts, misinformation, and skills acquired through experience or miseducation. The theoretical or practical misunderstanding of a subject. And I'm going to explain this. I realize that while we Africans sympathize with many ongoings across the world, we fail to sympathize with one another and they fail to sympathize with us. There are many things I grew up as an African seeing as ugly. Tribal marks, for instance. Tribal marks were ugly. Our traditional way of doing things. Because a lot of people subconsciously put out a narrative that painted those things in that delineation. And the more I grew, I gained knowledge. I'll give you an example. Growing up, I was taught that the better educated you are, the more likely it is you would make it. It was the narrative our parents sunk into our heads, at least my generation. And the more I lived, the more I realized how far off course that narrative is. I take a sample of everyone who I went to school with, those who are better in school did not end up being better in the real world. At least from my class and my school. I remember the top dogs in my secondary school, for instance. They're not the top dogs now. But that was a narrative. And we gathered knowledge under twisted narratives. What we thought was information was misinformation. What we thought was education was half the time miseducation. What we thought was understanding was misunderstanding. And over time, please close the door, darling. And over time, this has reared its head and proven itself over and over and over again. The second definition says awareness, familiarity gained by experience of a fact or situation. You are aware, but what is your awareness based on? I used to speak in tongues. Now I know that I was fooling myself. And 90% of the people, if not 99% of the people who currently speak in tongues today, are equally fooling themselves. Because unless you speak an audible human language that you cannot understand, and unless there is a translator, as the scriptures so very clearly emphasized, what you're doing is you're either blabbing, which is pagan, or you're reciting incantations, which is pagan. So your knowledge of God, what you believe is God, was built on miseducation, misinformation, and you created a type of awareness out of the fertile power of your mind. You gave life to a bunch of lies. I'll take the third definition. Knowledge is a familiarity. Let's hold the word familiarity. Awareness, also using awareness. Understanding of someone or something, such as facts, information, descriptions, or skills acquired through experience or education by perceiving. I love that word, perceiving. By discovering. A certain woman came out yesterday and said she served Satan for 990 years. And the Church of Satan came out and said they don't know this auntie. So where did she get her education? Because she must have felt it. I can't believe someone would just sit down and just write a book filled with hogwash. It must have been based on perceptions. It must have been based on education. She spent her time studying or believing or learning a narrative that has now been proven to be false. Oh, today is going to be a bit confusing. A lot of you, listen to this. It says, understanding of someone. Let's take Wikipedia's definition now. Knowledge is a familiarity, awareness, or understanding of someone. The average Christian will tell you they know God, they know Christ, and they know the devil. Whereas half the time, the devil is their God. They don't have a clue who the real God is. And Christ is another form of the devil. But they don't know, but yet base their familiarity and awareness and understanding on facts. Who makes something or what decides that something is a fact? This is going to be very deep. We sit down today and use the scriptures because I do not like the word Bible, because I do not trust those people who sat down 325 years after the death and resurrection of Christ to compile a set of books to suit an agenda, to suit politics, and to suit certain narratives they were trying to push. So if you base your knowledge on that, you will develop familiarity. You will develop understanding. You will gather together facts and information and description and skills through miseducation. Illiteracy is not the opposite of education. Miseducation is the right opposite of education. Because an illiterate does not know or claim to know. A miseducated fellow doesn't know in an opposite direction, but believes he is a custodian of knowledge. The more you read your facts, the more you realize that we have inherited enemies and friends who simply are friends to those we look up to, who were our oppressors but made themselves into our God by passing narratives, miseducation, blurring out facts, misinformation, and media propaganda. I'm an African man. My heroes are not British kings. My heroes are African kings. Bob Marley is more relevant to Christianity than an average Christian GO. Same with Fela Anikulapo Kuti. You all look at the vice. Oh yes, Fela smoked. So did Bob Marley. They had many women. If that is what it takes to judge a messenger, then I want to tell you today that David failed 10 times more, and yet that entertaining looking American guy who was about to preach in Nigeria, who made, I watched the sermon. I was disgusted, to say the least. He was talking about David and strategy. Who needs strategy in church when the church is filled with misinformation, twisted narratives? Who needs strategy? What we need is to unlearn and relearn. What we need is to purge the misinformation, the distorted facts, the media propaganda out of our systems and educate ourselves with the real truth, not the one. Someone asked me the other day, was Christ married? I said, sir, I don't know. Neither does your GO. He doesn't know. Because we do not have enough historical or scriptural evidence to outrightly say he wasn't or he was. What we've been dealing with is the fertile imagination of your teachers who themselves were taught false political narratives to suit certain agendas by propaganda created for the further embellishment of legends and turning legends into facts. Little wonder the word propaganda was invented by the church. I told you the other day that Daniel bowed to the statue of Nebuchadnezzar because Daniel was around. Some guy called me up today and was like, Daddy Freeze, Daniel, that there was a time they said nobody should pray, but Daniel kept praying. And when he was found out, blah, blah, so Daniel could not. I said, good, 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 good. Read Daniel chapter 2. Daniel chapter 2 said Daniel was invited and given many gifts and given power and authority. Daniel became one of them. At the time when nobody prayed and only Daniel prayed, Daniel was not one of them, but he had become one of them. So once you become one of them, the likelihood is great that you will worship their gods with them. The example is clear in the life of Solomon. Why should we think Daniel didn't bow? The scriptures are very clear in the book of Daniel, not the book of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, in the book of Daniel. An instance is mentioned in Daniel 3. Daniel is not mentioned, even though the end of Daniel 2 specifically says Daniel was around. And Daniel chapter 3 specifically says every race, nation, and language, every human that was available at that point, except Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, bowed to the statue. Why don't you want to look where you were told not to look? Are you afraid that what you would see would turn everything they've told you up until then, would turn them into the true lies that they really are? I'm not here to listen. The fact that it is a church practice automatically means I should question it. Who were the people who came up with church practices? The same people that sold us tithe and seeds? The same people that gave us Sunday worship? The same people that told us to celebrate Christ on Nimrod's birthday? The same people that named his resurrection after a river goddess? Those are the people who created church traditions. That alone means I must question everything. Even if I see it in the scriptures, I must understand why it is there. And I must historically, empirically, and lastly, spiritually, put everything I was told to the test. The greatest fall of mankind is the belief system that our generation is important. Let me tell you, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, there were no aeroplanes. Life 150 years ago was so different from now. And life 150 years from now is going to be so different from now. So if you think your generation is important, you're lying to yourself. Every generation felt it was the most important generation since creation. And with every generation, there's a shift in narrative, shift in ideology, shift in understanding. When you were in primary school, you were taught that the smallest part of matter is an atom and it cannot be divided. We are now taught that atoms can be split. What do you think happens in a nuclear reaction? Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we need to rearrange the narrative. What we were taught was misinformation, miseducation, leading to distorted facts and illogical perceptions. That is why we have more churches and more thieves, more churches and more fraud, more churches and more prostitutes, more churches and more suffering, more churches and more hatred. Because what you built, the premise upon which we built the foundation of our faith, is a wobbly, twisted, misaligned premise. God bless you all.